welcome everybody to this second session of the day. Our next topic, as promised, the role of the circular economy playing regarding trade and economic diversification. It's a big question, and what does the future look like? That is a huge question. We know that interest in the circular economy approach is growing, so we need to ensure that trade policies are designed and implemented with these goals in mind. If we don't do that, that risks missing a golden opportunity, doesn't it? So let's focus on the importance of aligning trade policies with circular economy approaches and looking at some of the benefits. As I said, we're going to be hearing from a panel very shortly, and then we'll open it up for discussion and questions for the final 20 minutes or so. So please do take part. It's lovely to have your interaction. We had a lovely session just gone where we had some fantastic questions. So I urge you to keep that going. First, we're going to hear from Helen Burdett. Helen is the lead for circular economy innovation with the World Economic Forum. And her portfolio includes Scale 360, which advances innovation ecosystems for environmental and economic impact with scalable, locally led innovation support delivered through private-public partnerships, all connected through a global digital community. Prior to joining the forum, she was director at Globality, a SoftBank-funded scale-up, bringing digital transformation and artificial intelligence to the procurement industry. She's waiting to introduce us to someone really interesting too. She's Kimberly Bothright, lead on global trade and investment at the World Economic Forum. So it's over to you, Helen.
As a circular professional, I often think about how trade can help us transition to a circular economy. And it's exciting to be here today to discuss actually the role of circular economy as it plays in trade as an industry. So joining me here is trade expert Kimberly Bothright, who I want to give a few minutes to introduce herself.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So I'm a lead on trade and investment at the World Economic Forum, and in particular, I look at sustainable trade issues. And recently that has involved looking at the intersection between trade and the circular economy. And so when you invited me to join this, I think it was a great opportunity because we know that the topic of circular economy is gaining a lot of momentum among the industry players that we're working with, but it's not necessarily always widely understood. So can you kick us off with a bit of an understanding of what is the circular economy?
Yeah, absolutely. At the forum, we think about the circular economy as kind of a set of principles or a new way or reimagining of how our economy works. So it isn't sort of one thing that can be defined in sort of a this is circular, but really a way of approaching any problem. It's a lens for decision making to change how our economy works. Right now, we take resources out of the earth, we form them into products and materials that we use, and then they are disposed of. And that's what we talk about as the linear economy. And the circular economy is reimagining that into more of a circle. So that from the product design phase of what goes into a product, how is it made, we're thinking about the full life cycle. How does supply chains work? How are we working with supply chain managers and P&L leaders rather than only sustainability teams to change the way that business models work? So it's a big topic, and I think we can drill down on some different ways of approaching it. A few within the forum, we think about circular economy as a means toward the net zero transition. We have a circular economy for the net zero industry transition team that focuses on specific materials. So we have an action track built around construction and the built environment and momentum for circular economy there. We have Scale 360, our circular innovation initiative that builds ecosystems for innovation at a local level in cities and countries around the world, through using design principles and supporting innovators working on new ideas so that all innovation is thinking about the circular economy and how we transition the way that we live and work. So starting from that basis of the big topic of circular, what role does that play in the trade industry?
So as you indicated, there has been a lot of interest in companies that run large, diverse international supply chains in achieving more circularity within those. Many of the companies that we work with at the forum divide that into a few different, when we say circularity, they divide it into a few different activities. So it means scaling alternatives to materials that can be really hard to render circular, for example, plastics. It also means facilitating robust flows of those materials. whether for recycling, repair, or remanufacturing. Again, that picks up to what you were saying, is that they're imagining it in the design process already. And then once the product is actually designed out on the market, they have to think about how they're going to get that product back to a facility where it can actually be reprocessed accordingly. We have a lot of companies that are making huge commitments in this area, but the reality is that as they start to go forward to implementing these commitments, it's really hard. We've built a global economy that is designed to flow very much for linear models, but not necessarily to have the materials coming back. There's also an issue of coordination across the system. The fact is that it's really hard to think about managing materials across different jurisdictions, different players in the supply chain, different standards, etc. So this is a whole systemic rethink that we need to do. I think a reflection of how hard it is that there's some data that the Platform on Accelerating the Circular Economy put out, indicating that today the world is only 8.6% circular. And actually, when they put out that figure, which was a year or so ago, they indicated that that was actually lower than the previous year. It was previously 9.1 or 9.6% circular. So we're going in the wrong direction, which I think is really interesting. So despite the rhetoric, it's actually very difficult in today's world to achieve this. But just because something is difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So on the trade team, we partnered up with the Forum Circularity team about a year ago, cognizant of this problem of implementation, and wanted to really understand what exactly these problems were, particularly to build reverse supply chains for materials. The issue of alternatives is important, and I think you need trade to make sure that you can have access to your alternative materials in different countries where you might be building your product. But the real kind of big challenge is around the reprocessing, whether recycling or remanufacturing. So we did a deep dive across a couple of different material streams to understand and pinpoint those barriers. So we looked at plastics and electronics, and we produced some white papers on those. They're online, and I can summarize what we found from talking to industry in about 3 points. So generally, the first major problem is classifications and border processes. The companies indicated that given the way that different countries approach used materials, and because sometimes that used material can be hazardous, it kicks in an extra layer of trade compliance that's actually really important from an environmental perspective. So we should not be having hazardous material, for example, something that's in a laptop, traded with zero oversight as to where it's going, because if it's dumped in a landfill or in another part of the environment, it can be very damaging both for people and the planet. But nonetheless, given the current system, and this stems from international conventions right down through implementation in national law, the vision at the international level and the treaty that governs this is very correct, but the actual implementation at the national level and the lack of coordination between environment ministries and customs officials means that, or border agencies, means that this isn't getting implemented in a correct way. So when you do need to move your hazardous material to a facility where it can be properly reprocessed, if it's electronics, the metals can be extracted and put back onto international markets. The fact is that it's so cumbersome and difficult to do that it's not happening. And because it's not happening, we're now getting alternative routes that end up meaning that it's either not being reprocessed, it's being illegally traded, or it's being dumped in the environment. An indication of how cumbersome it is that some companies reported that reverse logistics flows for used electronic products represented a 31% cost increase over outbound logistics for new. And for products that are classified for this, it was 190% more costly. Again, there's a slight difference when something is classified as used and hazardous. So again, this is a really complicated landscape, compliance landscape that companies have to navigate. Very quickly, 2 other points that came up a lot. Data shortages. So there's a lot of silos across the value chain as to what materials are where, and also there's much less visibility over the availability of recycled materials as compared with raw materials. So we tend to literally just know a lot less about where recycled plastics are and how much is available, or how much recycled cobalt there is, and usually there's not enough compared to the actual virgin material that's coming out of the ground. And thirdly, investment. So it's just a simple fact that investing in trash or waste management is again, it comes from this linear economy. It's not seen as valuable. It's not seen as particularly something, it's often considered quite high risk, particularly in developing countries. And this is also the big challenge, is that we can't just build a circular economy for advanced countries. We have to do it globally, because the fact we live in a world with global production and consumption, and because we need to deliver the circular economy everywhere, particularly as we get growing middle-class consumers in emerging economies. We need to get it right there too. But often the investment in those countries is really challenging to get those facilities in place. So yeah, maybe I'll stop there and turn it back to you, which is, given everything I've outlined, what does the future look like for you in terms of the global economy, trade, and the circular economy?
Yeah, so much to dig into, and lots of great thoughts there. I think we are optimistic about the future, and we frame our work in that context as much as possible. For even though our efficiency percentage has dropped, and we are concerned about that, and we're kind of waving the red flag about the concerns that we've moved from 9.1% to 8.6%, a number that actually held steady in 2020 through the global changes. But what's interesting about that metric, which comes from the Circular Economy Gap Report that Circular Economy puts out annually, is that we are recovering more in terms of total metric tons. Obviously, a lot more goes into that measurement than purely recovery, but we're becoming less efficient because we're producing more. So the total numbers are going up, our efficiency numbers are going down, but we are getting better at this over time. And we see that as industries hit kind of that turning point, it gets better faster. And that's kind of with the deep dives in electronics and trade that you called out. I think it's important. Another piece kind of the future of circular economy is something else that you touched on, and that's around safe and circular and inclusive and circular. Working toward a circular economy is not enough. It is a lens that we encourage be applied across industries and across product life cycles and business models, but it isn't enough in a vacuum. We work closely with our civil society teams and looking at how to apply those principles in an inclusive way, because economic disruption, which, let's face it, we're changing the way the economy works, and economic disruption often harms those who are most vulnerable. And while encouraging economic disruption for the transition to circular, we're very wary of what that can mean, and keeping the materials out of water and many areas like that. So I would actually kick the same question back to you. I know we're bumping up against our time a little bit, but what is the future for circular economy and trade, especially given that trade policies are quite national? And economic viability of circular economy is often in the volumes, and that you need a certain level of volume to make it economically viable to apply circular principles.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Maybe to conclude on a positive note, there's a group of 50 plus countries at the World Trade Organization that are committing to a structured process of discussion around trade and the environment, and circular economy is a big part of those discussions. And typically we're also starting to see interest from countries in integrating circular economy provisions into free trade agreements, which boils down to it not just being a national approach and let's unilaterally figure out how the material is going to flow across the border, what we let in, what we let out, but rather how can we collaborate so that there's common standards for recycling, so that there's clarity on what you have to, the compliance that you have to go through at the border, maybe that there's also fast track lanes for folks that are recognized as trusted traders, and so on and so forth. So I think we see a lot of complexity in figuring this out and bridging between the people that typically deal with trade policy and those that deal with environmental policy, and coaching them to be able to speak each other's language. But we do see a huge promise in that lots of countries are interested in actually doing the legwork here. So it's good.
Really exciting. Well, thank you, Glasgow, for having us. And thank you, Kimberly, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing from the other speakers.
And thank you very much to Helen and Kimberly there. On to Dr. Matas Vakernagel, who is the president of the Global Footprint Network, an international sustainability think tank with offices all over the place, but they've got them in Oakland, California, Brussels, and Geneva. The think tank is a non-profit that focuses on developing and promoting metrics for sustainability. Matas has worked on sustainability issues for organizations in many places across the globe. He previously served as the director of the sustainability program at Redefining Progress in Oakland, California, and he directed the Center for Sustainability Studies in Mexico. Mattis, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I'm Mattis Wackernagel with Global Footprint Network, wondering about what do we actually know about the future and how do we want to accommodate our economies accordingly. Really, when we think about the situation right now, it's much more like we are on a boat on the ocean and we can see a storm coming. And as we see the storm coming, it becomes quite obvious that our boat is not totally ready for that storm. So what's the best action? Do we have to wait for all the others boat owners to get together and decide who should fix their boat first? Or do we recognize, actually, if I don't fix my boat will not be ready. So in some ways we can say the future has never been more predictable than today. We know that people will want to eat and sleep in the future, as well as there will be much more climate change and fewer ecological resources, whichever path we take. If we move out fast of fossil fuel use, it will be tighter on the resource side. We'll have not as much climate change. In the other case, if we move too slowly collectively, we'll have a lot more climate change, and also the ecological resources will be at stake in the future. Given that, it becomes quite obvious that not to protect ourselves for that future, not to prepare our economies for that future that is so predictable, this doesn't make any economic sense. So in some ways, if we don't get to a clear agreement at COP26, for example, the need to act for us individually gets even stronger if we want to have a good economy. Now, let me explain that a bit more in numbers. We are in a new era, an era where our resource demand has started to exceed what Earth can regenerate. Some call it the Anthropocene. And what it essentially means is that our demand for ecological regeneration exceeds how much we have available by about 75%. So we are using the Earth 75% faster than what can be renewed. And one big effect, obviously, is climate change. Now, it's about like living on 1.73 Earth, but as we know, we only have one, and we can translate that into a date, and we can say, okay, what does that mean? It means actually between January 1st and July 29th this year, humanity, have used as much as Earth can renew in the entire year. Now, wow, that's a big difference. What can we do? I think the first point is to recognize that we really have a very simple choice. Do we want to strive? Do we want to strive for one planet prosperity, or do we want one planet misery? Because the one planet is not changing. And if we want to go to one planet prosperity, obviously what we need to do is to move the date. If we move the date 6 days every year, we'll be back to one planet before 2050. How do we do that? Obviously, circular economy is a big part of it. So how do we move the date? Obviously, most effectively with the solutions we love. What solutions do you love? We produced 100 days of possibility as a way to mark the path, the bridge from Earth Overshoot Day, that was in July, to COP26, to show from around the world many possibilities that exist to move the date in a way that is also cost effective. Please visit us. There's so many ideas. Many of them also are linked to the circular economy, but it also links to social issues, like, for example, investing in women, etc. Now, let me explain to you why it's economically advantageous to think ahead. And it's very simple. If we look historically at how much we have used the red line compared to how much Earth is able to regenerate over the last 60 years, we can also think about what does it mean for the future. And even if we pursue just kind of the old extrapolation, the level of ecological debt that we are going to produce is so great that it's unlikely to be functional. Or we can be wiser and follow the IPCC 1.5 degree scenario, and still we will add more ecological debt to the planet, but not as much. So in whatever scenario you look at, the question is then, when you invest in anything, for most of its time that it's going to be alive, if it's like an energy system, a house, a road, also people being born now, they will be living in that predictable future. So the question is, are they fit for that future? Because if they are not, you face two problems. One is that the value of your assets will be much, much less if it's not fit for the future we'll be living in. And the second one is that you will lose the value at the time when the economy is frail. So investing in things that are fit for the future, to prepare yourself for the future we can anticipate, is the best investment you can do. In the end, we think it's very much like brushing your teeth. We brush your teeth not just because it's a noble effort for the world. We don't have conference about fighting overall like tooth decay. Rather, we know practice every day to brush your teeth is the best investment to protect yourself from predictable tooth decay if you don't protect yourself. So let's do that. Investing in ourselves is like brushing our teeth, and that will help us all to be stronger, not just ourselves, but by our cities, our companies, our countries being prepared for the future we can anticipate. We also help the world to be prepared. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mattis. Now, was I wrong, or were there chirping birds? I heard chirping birds. Maybe I don't know, too much coffee in the break, but it was lovely anyway. Thank you so much. Now, we're about to meet a major player in the people business. Human capital is so important in times of economic adaptation and diversification. So we're now going to get the thoughts of Joanna Bonnet, who is the head of sustainability and group treasurer for Page Group. A highly respected industry leader with FTSE 100 and FTSE 250, Joanna works alongside C-suite, PLC board and shareholders as a trusted advisor. She chairs the Treasury Risk Committee and Sustainability Committee. As global head of sustainability, Joanna is responsible for strategy to execution of the Sustainability at Page initiative, including stakeholder management of shareholders, suppliers, clients, and employees. And she's joined by Steve Ingham, also of Page Group. Over to you, Joanna.
Over the course of the COP26 summit, we're going to hear about the incredible journeys to date, as well as the significant challenges we face as a species on planet Earth. My name is Joanna Bonnet, and I am the head of sustainability at Page Group. I am joined by Steve Ingham, my CEO. Page is a professional recruitment company operating in 37 countries. And together, we hope to inspire you to action. Today, we face extreme inequalities within society. Inequalities driven by who and how society engages with paid employment. This needs to be overcome, and in doing so, it will help you, as business leaders, tackle more structural questions on the future direction of work. Having been with Page Group for 35 years and seeing huge changes within the recruitment and employment industry, Steve, what is your view on the barriers and inequalities affecting social inclusion?
Thanks, Joe. It's surprising and alarming how inequalities exist in this modern and educated world. It's very sad how many people have to pretend to be someone they're not, or hide their inequality, or just avoid the workplace altogether. Over the last few years, we've had campaigns such as Me Too and the Black Lives Matter movement, and these have highlighted the broader issues in society. In addition, varying rules have been introduced around employment, such as mandatory reporting on the gender pay gap in the UK, or gender and disability quotas in France and Brazil, and many others. But it shouldn't take any of these to create a totally inclusive society, including the workplace. Everyone should feel safe, accepted, and have the same opportunities in both society and at work, irrespective of movements or heightened media or rules. I believe this is what the younger generation in particular are demanding. In addition, as business or political leaders, we should appreciate the benefit this creates. New ideas, higher employment, lower social welfare, better performing businesses, and therefore economies. As the global leader in the recruitment of qualified professionals such as engineers, technology experts, accountants, lawyers, we can see both pre and post-COVID the huge demand and shortages for talent. It means Page is performing at record ever levels. Two things are driving it. The need from employers to hire specific talent to meet what business leaders see they need to perform in this post-COVID high-tech world, whilst preserving the environment. And two, the desire from employees to work for businesses that demonstrate their desire to be inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. It's great that companies like Page voluntarily sign up to adapting the UN Sustainable Development Goals and are embedding social inclusion into the DNA of their businesses. But this requires strong, determined, authentic leadership and commitment from all leaders, business and political.
How does this relate to the circular economy and global trade?
Well, we can already see a shift in trade patterns. Jobs and skills are shifting on a global scale. This means we have a responsibility to upskill or retain workers to be appropriate to our needs, but also by being more inclusive, we must search for the skills from all facets of diversity. AI is an example of something that will have significant impact on office-based workers, how they work and the types of jobs they will do. Climate change and the shift to circular economies and a change in trade patterns will disproportionately affect different communities, and we're seeing this. A good example would be the impact on fast fashion, which affects farmers, then garment makers, and of course logistics companies. If we can stop climate change, the environment will be the ultimate winner, of course, but the cost to local communities and emerging economies will have to be supported.
This is one challenge, and it's one of many that's going to be discussed at COP26. It will only be resolved by governments working alongside industry leaders and businesses to form a future for everyone. From an employment perspective, it can only be resolved if we tackle the inequalities that you mentioned today. We must work together to form a part in solving the issues for tomorrow. How are recruitment companies such as Page Group helping solve these issues?
Yeah, well, you're right. There is a huge shortage of talent, often referred to as the war for talent. There is also a huge desire from companies and their employees to be more diverse and inclusive. You know, the Valuable 500 is one example of very significant proof of this. These 500 companies employ 20 million employees. As a recruitment business, we see firsthand the causes of staff attrition and why employees are choosing, particularly at the moment, to move jobs. If they don't feel either that the values of their employer do not match theirs, or they're not supported because of a diversity they demonstrate, then they vote with their feet. At Page and frankly other recruiters should follow, we help clients with these issues. How do they source candidates from the different facets or diversity? How do they demonstrate they have the values employees want? We're upskilling and educating our employees to help employers do the same. We use data intelligence to show clients exactly the issues they have around retention and attrition. We show them the trends that are happening.
Page Group has over 7,000 employees globally, and the vast majority of those employees are recruitment consultants. How do your teams on the ground in each of the countries give back to the community?
And this is important, I have to say, to our culture. Our stated purpose is to change lives for people by creating opportunities for them to reach their potential. Now, of course, every day we're placing, hopefully, the perfect candidate in their perfect job, and that's certainly helping them reach their potential. Our social impact initiatives also allow our employees to give back to society using their skills as recruiters. So recent examples would be providing CV writing training and also mock interview skills training at workshops, which we've done with a number of different charities, or LinkedIn seminars, or training around how to develop your career in schools. This work, along with our wider D&I initiatives, form an important part of the overall culture. Of course, recruitment consultants are known to be very competitive as well, and so they use their energy all around the world to run marathons or do many other challenges to also raise money for different aspects. And of course, the aspects vary enormously when you're in 37 countries, as we are.
I've seen firsthand these initiatives changing lives. It is true to say it is linked to our purpose, but it also forms a really important component of our moral obligation or social license in which our local communities grant us, allowing us to operate within their communities. How are you doing this as an individual?
And I must say, it's important as leaders, we all do something as individuals as well to represent authentic leadership. What I'm doing is I'm spearheading a hidden talent campaign. In 2019, I had a near fatal accident that left me paralyzed and in a wheelchair. At that point, my limited knowledge about those who are classified disabled went on a steep learning curve, as you can imagine. And I was shocked and horrified by what I learned. Within the 20% of people who are disabled, the difference between those who are employed is 52% versus 81% who work when they don't have a disability. There's a 12% pay gap that exists between those who are disabled and abled. The lack of understanding and awareness that exists, fears of causing offence and wrong assumptions made. And yet here we have a war for talent shortages, but the talent exists in this category of disability, but is widely ignored. I've addressed huge global businesses. I've spoken publicly in national media. I head up 2 charities. I've joined up with many other business leaders to try to persuade government to help us change this injustice.
One final question, if I may. Can I turn your attention to PageGroup's contribution to the environment? What are you doing to minimize your impact on the environment and specifically reduce your carbon emissions?
Yeah, thanks, Joan. It's obviously an important question. From an environmental perspective, it's important to remember PageGroup is obviously an office-based company and therefore has a smaller carbon footprint compared to many other companies or many other industries, such as mining or whatever springs to mind. That said, we have a really important part to play, and we also must show that we're prepared to play and make a difference because it's what our employees want. So we've committed our operational carbon footprint to be net zero by 2026, which is ambitious. It's only 5 years away. This means we're looking into each facet of our emissions in close detail and working alongside our partners to achieve this ambitious target. So, for example, whilst we don't own our offices, we rent them, I'm delighted that this year alone, we've still managed to convert 77 of them to renewable energy. This represents over 54% of our offices globally. That's a good result in year 1. But we've got to continue to challenge ourselves for further improvements, and topics such as recycling, changing our car policies to electric cars, how much we travel around the world, particularly internationally, are all at the forefront and will change. This is expected of us by our employees, our candidates, our clients, and of course our shareholders. Finally, of course, as a world leader in recruitment of specialists, we're helping our clients by recruiting ESG professionals to help them.
Let me summarize. The challenge of equipping the global workforce to deal with climate change and transition to a circular economy is already being faced today. We must overcome structural issues preventing minority groups accessing and maintaining paid employment. Paid employment changes people's lives and creates opportunities. And only by removing the barriers to employment today will businesses and their employees be ready to face a dramatically different world tomorrow. Thank you, Steve, and to those in the audience for listening today.
Thanks, Joe.
And to Steve for that, very enlightening. Now we're going to go to Juan Carlos Orozco Rodrigo from Celsa Group. This is the largest Spanish-owned steel company and the second largest European long products producer. The multinational consists of 8 large business groups with steel producers, rolling mills, processing plants, distribution companies, and recycling centres, with more than 9,600 employees worldwide and with an industrial presence in Denmark, Spain, Finland, France, Norway, and the United Kingdom. I'm going to hand over to Juan Carlos.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be with you today. I will try to explain to you how Celsa Group has initiated its journey to the circular economy, to the circular industry. We are a manufacturing company, so I will try to talk about tangible things, data, facts, and not about, I will try to speak very little about 2050, because in 2050 probably I will be retired, so you will not be able to ask me, Juan Carlos, you promised us 29 years ago something and you have not delivered it. So we are the first European producer of recycled steel. What does it mean? We produce 7 million tons of steel. What does it mean? Our revenues are 5.2 billion euros. So recycling business is an important business, much more important than what we think, and we are aware. Steel represents 7% of the total emissions of CO2, and it is expected to double the consumption of steel by 2050. Why? Because the increase in the population and because of the increase in the development of the emerging countries. Now, you have to think that steel is very useful and it is very cheap. The cost of 1 kilo of steel is lower than the cost of 1 kilo of bread. The cost of 1 kilo of steel is lower than the cost of a bottle of 1 liter of still water. So it is very cheap and very useful. But perhaps you don't know that in order to produce 1 ton of steel, we need to emit 2 tons of CO2. I'm not an engineer, so I think that gas has no weight at all. So it is curious that in order to produce 1 ton of steel, we need 2 tons of CO2. What is the volume of a ton of CO2? It is the same volume as a swimming pool that is 25 meters long, 10 meters wide, 2 meters deep. Now, the emissions of CO2 worldwide in 1 year are 51 billion tons of CO2, 51 billion swimming pools. I like a lot swimming, but not so much. But there are 2 routes of producing steel. If we go back more than 3,000 years, when the Iron Age began, humankind invented steel. Steel is a combination of iron ore, reduced iron, plus coal with carbon. And we use carbon or coal as a source of energy. So the combination of iron ore plus carbon gives you steel, right? Well, and steel was really scarce before scarcity of steel more than 3,000 years ago. Why? Because humankind was not able to produce it. The only way to have steel in that time was to take it from a meteorite. So when a meteorite was found in those days, people had 2 chances. One is to treat it as a present of the gods and to pray to it, because this stone was really strong, or they could transform it in weapons. In those days, steel was more expensive than gold, because it's more useful than gold. It is not so nice, but it's really strong, right? You have to think that today, we continue producing steel in the same way. We take iron ore, we add coking coal, and we get steel in what today we call a blast oxygen furnace. If you produce steel through this route, you generate 2 tons of CO2 per every ton of steel. And you have to think that, for instance, in Europe today, 70% of the steel that is produced through the BOF route. Well, this is the reason why the steel business is seen as a gray industry, contaminating industry, and mainly because these big companies that you can read news in the newspaper about them are listed companies like ArcelorMittal, Tata Steel, ThyssenKrupp. These groups produce steel mainly through the BOF route. But I bring you good news, because there is another way to produce steel. This way is recycling scrap. In the 1950s, in Italy, someone thought, okay, there is a lot of scrap on the surface of the earth. Someone has spent a lot of money, a lot of energy transforming iron ore in steel. How we can take advantage of it? So he put, or she put, some tons of scrap in a furnace, and with electricity, he or she melted it and transformed this scrap in steel. When you produce steel through the electrical furnace route, the emissions are, on average, 250 kilos per ton of steel, 9 times less than when you produce steel through the BOF route. Now, you think that customers think that we are very nice because we are recyclers, we get rid of the scrap on the surface of the earth, and we are able to produce a so useful thing like a steel with 9 times lower emissions? Not at all. The price of the steel is the main driver of the purchase decision of our customers. But I bring you again good news. It is changing. It begins to change. For a few years, mainly customers related to the automotive industry are caring about the emissions product declarations, product declarations, and they want to know how much CO2 we have emitted in order to produce our steel. And this very year, 2021, is when we have seen that construction companies also begin to care about what is the emissions that has been needed in order to produce this steel. So things will change. We have 4 characteristics in Celsa. We are the second European recycler of scrap. We recycle 8 million tons of scrap. The reason why, when you put in a furnace 100 tons of scrap, you don't get 100 tons of steel, you get around 90%, 90 in this case. Our electrical furnace emits 9 times less emissions than a BOF, blast oxygen furnace. We are the most vertically integrated group producer of steel of the world. And this is essential for the circular economy because we have more than 10,000 suppliers, and at the same time we have more than 2,000 customers. We're a big company, so we can help these suppliers that normally are small companies, scrap traders, to become more circular. So this is an important role that we want to continue to do in our group. And we are a family-owned company. And during these days in these panels, I have not heard about family-owned companies. You have to think that the transition to the circular economy will take time. So if you don't have a long-run view of what will be the future of your company, and you are only worried about your results of the next quarter that you will have to send to the stock exchange, there is a mismatch between what you are caring about and with this long-term transition that we are facing. So when we have a private-owned company like ours, we think that we have an advantage in front of these other companies that are more focused in the short term. Main figures of Celsa Group, our revenues, as I have said, 5.2 billion euros. Direct and indirect jobs, 30,000. Direct only 9,000. We recycle 8 million tons of scrap every year. We produce 7 million tons of steel every year. We have 120 sites in 9 countries in Europe, and we invest 180 million per year in CapEx on average. We are recyclers, and recycling is the last resort of the circular economy. We should focus in reusing, product ownership sharing, improve the useful life of products, but when everything has not worked, then the only chance that you have is to recycle. So we can see the recycling as the first building block of the circular economy. And another thing that's important to take into account that is that there is a geopolitical war for controlling raw materials. Europe does not have raw materials. As you know, China invested a lot of money during the last 10, 15 years buying mines in Africa and in South America. They have the control of magnesium, tungsten, and rare earths. So perhaps in the other building of COP26, they are now talking about these geopolitical issues. But you have to bear in mind that in Europe, we have a lot of raw materials, but we are using them. This building is full of steel, aluminum, copper, so we have to take advantage of the raw materials that we already have here, and we cannot allow this raw material to go out of Europe. So in Celsa, we recycle, together with 8 million tons of scrap, more than 100,000 tons of non-ferrous metals and 5,000 tons of plastics. And additionally, some years ago, every year, we had to send 1.5 million tons of waste to the landfill. And this was very expensive, but currently it's even more expensive than some years ago, and it will become even more expensive to send something to the landfill. Today, 90% of these 1.5 million tons of waste is sold to third parties. For instance, to the cement producers that they use our slag as a raw material. So you can get money when you care about the environment. And we are proud to tell you that we are already fitting 2 of the goals of the European taxonomy. The first one is the mitigation of climate change. The European taxonomy explicitly says that when you produce steel out of an electrical furnace, you are contributing to the mitigation of the climate change if you have some parameters of low contamination, and this is our case. And the second goal is the circular economy, because we are the second recycler of scrap. You have to think that the value of the scrap that is recycled, the value in euros, but also in tons, is higher than all the plastic, glass, and paper together recycled. So when we say that we are the second recycler of scrap of Europe, we are the second recycler of Europe, full stop. And you have to think that our emissions of CO2 are 60% less than the average European producer of steel through the electrical furnace route. We are not comparing us now with the BOF producers because it makes no sense. They pollute 9 times more than us. 95% of the content of our steel is scrap, 95%. And the steel that we produce can be recycled infinitive times. There are very few products that you can think that they are recyclable infinitive times, perhaps glass. I don't know. Our commitment, and now we'll talk about 2050, and probably in 29 years I will not be here. First, in 2025, our scope 1 and 2, we want to reduce it 50%, 2030, 70% down, 2035, 90% down, 2040, net positive. And these figures that I have just given to you are work in progress. We want to be more ambitious, and perhaps we will revisit these targets. But sustainability is not only about decarbonation, it is about circular economy, to be more specific, in our case, circular industry, and even to be more specific, circular supply chain. We are in a transition in which we will have a new system, new business models to put in place, in which collaboration with suppliers, with customers, to focus on the scope 3 is really important. And also we cannot forget that we have to have social goals in order to improve the world where we live, in order to be net positive. Our vision is we want to be leaders of the circular supply chain to build a net positive future. To wrap up, as a summary, we at CELSA believe that the world can be a place where long-run prosperity for all will be possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Lovely to have you with us. Right, we will crack on. We're going to have a panel now. And can I say to our audience, it would be just lovely if you guys also got involved and asked some questions. We had a lovely cracking one from the gentleman in the middle there, the last session. I'm hoping for more of that. And I'm sorry you guys that are joining us virtually can't see it, but the audience are very engaged. And I want them to jump in as much as possible. So welcome back to Mathis and to Helen. And by some strange, amazing technology, Joanna is now live with us here in Glasgow. So let's get cracking. I'm going to ask you all a question, but maybe I'll start with you, Helen. It sounds simple. It's a big question, though. How is policy going to drive innovation and stimulate economic diversification? If you could get that into one answer, I'll be surprised, but go for it.
Indeed, big question, and I think the answer is probably different kind of everywhere you look. I think earlier in this panel, Kimberly and I were talking about the importance of policy for trade. And in our Scale 360 initiative, we also look at the importance of policy for facilitating and enabling innovation. And I think we look at the kind of ecosystems that entrepreneurs operate in, whether they're kind of focused on trade or more broadly on the circular economy. We need to be making all innovation circular innovation, so the kind of new ideas and new products coming to market are bringing in circular principles, and how policies are shaped at a city level, at a local level, at a regional level, in individual countries. I think we have to kind of look into local environments for some of the policies that are going to enable this, because those innovations first succeed or fail at a local level. And so I'll take kind of a small piece of your very big question and maybe hand it over to the other panelists to bring in more pieces of the picture.
Hey, let's turn to you then, Mathis. A challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I mean, policy in the end is an expression of what a society wants. It's not just kind of something abstract that is being produced. And the question is, what do we want it? That's what the biggest rub is. Whether we understand that the competitiveness of a country depends of being significantly more resource efficient. And I just would like to remind ourselves that, I mean, the regenerative future, which depends on circularity, obviously, is inevitable. The question is only how we get there. Do we get there by design or by disaster? So those societies who recognize that it's an absolute value proposition for their economies to be able to operate that way, and that it takes time, as we just heard from the last presentation, to adjust our infrastructure, our industrial processes to that. Those who recognize it, they will put the policies in place. But the policies, as I would say, is a reflection actually of the deeper understanding of what does value mean for society. Is value really based on being able to operate within planetary limits or not? And I think that's where the rub today is.
Thank you very much, Mathis. Let's ask you that then, Joanna.
I think
another small question.
Yeah, the reflections so far have been spot on. I would also say working in harmony with businesses, depending on what sector they're in. How can they all work together in a complete supply chain?
Are there some sectors that are better than others at doing this at the moment?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that one, actually.
Yes, the steel business.
The steel business. Oh, what a surprise. Yeah. I don't know if you want to go on and continue, or well, actually, let's pick up with Juan Carlos for that. You pick up. Yes, you think there is a, innovation. Policy is going to drive innovation. You're already proving this.
Yes. Well, the consciousness of the world that we need to transform, to go through this transformation is essential. I think that the authorities can help, governments can help. I'm not so sure that they will be able to do all they can do, because sometimes governments are not able to foresee all the consequences of their decisions, and they have side effects that are not welcome afterwards. But I think that the society must take care of it. As I have explained, we don't get any single euro more because our steel is greener than other steel. So, and yesterday in one panel, someone said that when you ask people, 85% of the consumers says that they are very conscious about the importance of keeping the environmental situation under control, but only 30% of them are eager to pay a little bit more for what they buy. In the previous panel, we have heard a gentleman from the University of Norway that the students are really conscious about what is happening in the world, but I'm afraid that if we ask the middle-aged, middle-educated citizen of Europe, we will not get this engagement. And if we think about the emerging economies, if we think a Chinese citizen, if we think about an Indian citizen, that they are struggling to get the standard of living that we have, I'm afraid that we have in front of us a long run and difficult times.
Absolutely. So it's about developing world, and it's about generational differences as well. Let me ask you about that, Helen. If you're in a developing world situation, you're going to have a completely different sense of urgency than the rest of the world, aren't you? That's the point.
So I think there's a lot to it. I think we need to have the same level of urgency everywhere in the world, and that is a very high level of urgency. I think that's the message that's being communicated COP26 broadly right now.
That's what I'm saying. We absolutely don't, though. It's still not right. And then there is that generational thing as well, that a bunch of middle-aged people are making all the decisions around the world, generally speaking. Are they engaging? Are they engaging enough? Are they listening deeply to what young people are telling them they need, as Juan Carlos and, in fact, our previous speaker, Kurt, was saying?
I think they're trying. I think that the conversations that are happening now are working toward, this concept of policy being a reflection of society and what we need to have happen, and then the conversations that need to happen for that to be borne out. We just heard from industry that policies often have impacts that are unforeseen. I think that will always happen, and it's collaboration is a way that we can mitigate the impacts of that and foresee as many of those as possible through business and governments collaborating in these conversations. And so I think it is a matter of raising that level of urgency. I tend to be on the optimistic side of, yes, we can be critical, but we also all need to keep doing the things in all of the different directions, because there's not enough happening now.
I'm going to let Juan Carlos jump in, and then I'll get your comments as well, Mattis, off the back of that. Juan Carlos.
Yes, I'm also optimistic, but and I don't want to be a gloomer, but here we are sitting Western people, and you have to think that the population of North America and Europe is less than 10% the total population of the world, but we are responsible for more than 50% of the emissions that are today in the atmosphere. And India, and Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico, they want to have the same standard of living that we have. And they say, come on, now that is my time to be richer, you tell me that we cannot pollute? So either we help them or this transition will not take place. I'm optimistic because I'm sure that this transition will take place because we don't have any other alternative. So for sure we will do it. But it will take time.
That's the problem, isn't it? We never know how much time it will take. Mattis, what are your observations about this?
I would say that the world is not so binary anymore, that there are just two types of countries. And there's some countries with mountains, some without mountains, some have, like, some think it's too expensive to send all the kids to school, some think it's too expensive not to send all the kids to school, etc. But I think so it depends really kind of how various cultures see the future. We had a very interesting conversation with an exchange student from China. She eventually studied in the United States, and she told me the following story. When they in geography in China learned about kind of the world, they had a class on resources. And they said three things. Resources are important. Let's look carefully after resources. And the third thing was, let's first use the resources from other places. And that may sound cynical, but I wish every country would teach resources like this. Because if you say they're so important that we should care for our resources first, you take them really seriously. If every country taught like that about resources, we would be in a very different place. Today, too many countries don't think resource security is an essential parameter for future success. But I think some countries start to recognize that, and I think, for example, China is much ahead. In our economies, mostly, there are exceptions even in the Western world, but in most countries, resource security is not a priority for competitiveness. And that's, I think, where we are going astray. That's why I'm so glad to hear the story of the CELSA group, but it's still unique in the West.
Change that. What's going to make CELSA group the norm instead of the exception?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts like, so for me, the litmus test is the following. When you look at competitiveness plans of countries, do they have resource security at the center of their plan? And that's where we have to still the biggest gaps. So we make these carbon plans as if they were a separate thing. I would say no country needs a carbon plan. We just need competitiveness plans, but the competitiveness plans have to recognize that we live in a world that is with high predictability moving into a future of climate change and resource constraints. So we need to have competitiveness plans that are fit for the world we live in. And that's where the gap is.
Can I turn to you, Joanna, and talk about, I hate that word, human capital. I'm talking about people, recruitment. We were talking before we came on the panel about, you're saying it's really difficult now to recruit people because this is very interesting, the tables are turning. It seems that young people are feeling very empowered and very frustrated and impatient with potential employers, and they're basically, they're looking at their CVs the other way around now and saying, what are you doing to change the situation with climate emergency? What are you doing? What are you actually doing in concrete terms to do that? Can you give us some examples of your experience there and how maybe that ground-up youth movement will change the culture?
Yeah. So we see it across many different geographies. We're in 37 odd countries globally. So depending on what facet of sustainability we want to look at, whether it's environmental, whether it's diversity, we call them candidates, but the prospective employees do rate companies. So if they're in Italy and say, for example, the candidate is disabled or from a disadvantaged background, there's different legislation allowing them to be protected employees, to be able to get gainful and meaningful employment. What we're seeing with other businesses, say in France, we're engaging with some of the largest employers in France to help them with their diversity needs. And again, those employees or potential employees are questioning them about their motives. What is it actually going to be like for me when I join? It's not about today and your lovely diversity plan. It's
and lovely brochures and
exactly.
slideshows.
They want to see beyond that. Tell me what it's actually like to work here. And it's not just a question. They will make their decision of whether they actually want to proceed.
You actually had an example of that, yes, didn't you? Can you tell us about that?
So recently I've employed 3 people within my own sustainability team. And I've got every single one of the people I interviewed, whether they were successful or not, questioned me, quite rightly, about our sustainability philosophy, our vision, what's our strategy, how are we going to implement it. It wasn't, again, the glossy brochure. They wanted to know, how am I going to play a definitive role in that? Where will I be in 5 years' time? Where will the company be in 5 years' time? And show me what I've done to get the company there 10 years, 20 years.
So they're saying, we're not doing the greenwashing thing and we're not buying that anymore, but were you able to tell them?
Yes.
Because, well, let's be honest, some of us don't even know what the jobs will be. That's what's kind of exciting and challenging about this situation, isn't it?
Absolutely. So that's where I think my role and my team's role will transition over time. We're obviously making powerful inroads to our net carbon zero pledge, and we're continuing to do that. But we are highly focused on the social impact in society, diversity, breaking down barriers of employment and maintaining employment. Now, we will go to a place of thought leadership. So where we're speaking in our presentation about what is the impact of AI on office workers going forward. Where will the jobs go through the circular economy? Where will jobs be in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? So already today we see the shift from large employers wanting to move global workforces, or say call centres from maybe Europe to Latin America. We see that, we help with those transitions, but we can see where the power plants, the companies that manufacture, how those supply chains are also changing depending on the industries. So we've got to help with that transition, yes, but as an employer ourselves, but as people with impact in the employment industry, we've got to help the economy, but we've also got to help people within the economy adapt to the multiple careers that they have. People will transition their skills over time, and it is going to be a journey. I know earlier today we were talking about multiple careers and the importance of upskilling workforce, and it is absolutely vital, and it will only be achieved as we go through, but it will ultimately be the success of a circular economy. Without it, it just won't.
I don't know if as an employer you'd like to talk about that as well, very briefly. Then I would like to ask our audience if they've got any questions so far.
I'm convinced that the new generations are more worried about what we are talking about. And this is a reality, and I'm sure this is the case, but listen to you, I'm a little bit skeptical, I'm a little bit cynical.
No,
cynical.
Not you.
And I was thinking, if I were 22 years old, finishing my university studies, and I was looking for a job, I will ask about sustainability. So we have greenwashing in the companies. Perhaps we can face greenwashing in these interviews for hiring people. Just be careful. So I will take note of this idea that they have just
yeah, it's interesting. Anyone in the fascinating stuff. Anyone in the audience like to ask a question? It'd be lovely if anyone's a recruiter or anyone that's in the position of hiring people. Oh, there we go. Somebody in the front here. Guys, I'm sorry you can't see our audience. I keep saying they're very attractive. Every single one of them. They're very attractive. Sorry, who do we have here?
I'm Nick Skelton from Stantec.
Nick, what's your question, and who would you like to put it out to? You can put it out to the whole panel if you like.
It's a recruitment-related question, actually, because we've been doing quite a bit of thinking about the skills that are needed to get us to net zero. So we've been thinking about that within our organisation and about the differences between what we have now and how it needs to change. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what do you think the skills, possibly aptitudes, that are likely to be needed over the next 5 years to actually help that companies will be looking for to make the change?
I always bring it back to mental agility, because even if we take it to the basics of what the phone technology or computers over the last 10 years, the transition of us mentally as workers in an office-based environment has changed rapidly. Now that's happening across all sectors, all roles, whether we're talking, blue-collar work, white-collar work. Now, mental agility is what allows us to do that and to be able to multitask.
How do you prove that in an interview situation, though? Or how do you even get to an interview situation when somebody says that's a candidate that's very good at being mentally agile? How do you know from the first contact you get from an applicant for a job that maybe that's the person you're interested in?
Really good question. So a lot of employers, particularly those that want to hold unconscious bias and bias-free interview processes, they have a range of different techniques. So they will have panels, so multiple people, perhaps a diverse panel making conducting the interview. They will do perhaps skills-based questions, so then that way multiple candidates or diverse candidates can ask those skills, and it's not a yes/no question, it's more about give us an example. And then
is this competency stuff?
Absolutely, but then it also goes back to school. What are the schools teaching the children? How do we as parents, as society, bring people up in that next in that pipeline for tomorrow? So within the next 5 years, it's certainly agility, mental agility, the soft skills, communication, because if we're looking...
Well, absolutely, you're just absolutely in my pitch here, because I'm thinking, if you can't communicate and you're not confident about doing it, you're out of the game immediately. Yes. And that's what worries me, that there's an awful lot of potential. It's like an iceberg. You see the people that are at the top that are very articulate, they've gone to university or college, they've got a degree, they've got some sort of qualification. You've got people that are clever in ways that might be really useful for the future, thinking in a more agile way, that aren't coming through the usual routes or maybe don't display those same skills. So how do you find them?
Good question. I would put your challenge to your recruiter. Whether you use an in-house recruiter, say your HR function, or you employ a recruitment agency to conduct the recruitment on your behalf, make sure those candidates are diverse. Make sure that you're getting people from all walks of life, all education backgrounds. Make sure that you select people based on skills, not necessarily what they have on paper. Obviously, that forms an important element of it, but you do need to look beyond the normal and talk about what can they bring. Really make sure that you build a connection with the person, because it has to be a two-way street. It will only be a successful hire, so to speak, if it works both ways for the candidate and the employer.
Does that help you, or are you thinking you need more information? I'm just curious to know.
It does and it doesn't.
Right, why doesn't it?
Well, I think what I'm reading into what you've said is we want bright people who think quickly. Well, we always want bright people who think quickly. I think the solution isn't at the recruitment stage, it's well before that. Yeah. We actually need to be influencing our education systems and our training systems. You mentioned bright people from unis. I think further education colleges are much more critical in terms of training the next generation of people who will operate.
Places like this, City of Glasgow
like
College,
this,
yeah.
But I don't think that adapting to climate change is a central part of the curriculum yet, and it needs to be.
Yeah, so we're not showcasing what could be jobs for the future. I think there's a big disconnect, and I don't know if you both agree as well, joining us remotely, Mattis and Helen, that there's a big disconnect between what young people think will be the opportunities and even what people that are recruiting think will be the opportunities and what they actually are. I don't think we're kind of explaining what the possibilities are yet, or is that really unfair? Helen, I don't know if you've got a view on this.
I think it's fascinating where this conversation has gone. And we kind of think about circular economy and trade, and now we're really getting into the workforce and the people who are doing this. And I am not a recruiting expert. And I think that what Joanna said about making sure that your recruiters are aware of these challenges and the businesses or any organization really hiring's priorities and the kind of putting the effort into unbiased interviewing and putting the quotas in place so that you are kind of actually building a diverse workforce. And so I think, again, not an expert in that, but investing in bringing those experts in-house so that your processes and the systems that kind of HR and recruiting are using kind of can effectively meet those aims, I think is an important piece of that system. One thing from kind of, I think it's come up a few times. One is kind of integrating into competitiveness. Now we're thinking about recruiting, and all of this is outside of the sustainability group necessarily. And I think mainstreaming the importance of sustainability goals and climate and circular economy kind of into organizations beyond the sustainability kind of group is one of the key things that we can do. And I'd be interested, Joanna, you mentioned that every candidate asked you about the sustainability vision. You know how much that happens outside of the sustainability team. Two executives that are hiring in other positions, we see a trend kind of in the groups working on jobs and competitiveness of the kind of those that are applying for jobs being interested in that, even if they're working in accounting or they're working in communications more broadly. So I think some of these threads kind of connect in different ways.
Would you like to briefly comment? I'm sorry, that was really unfair of me, actually. I'm sorry, I'm throwing things at you because it's just coming up and it's interesting, but Mattis, sorry, do your best.
No, to be absolutely blunt, I think the academic world has absolutely failed the young generation. People born after 1985 will still be in the workforce in 2050. They will have to help to oversee and make happen a transformation in speed and scale exceeding what we've seen with the iPhone, but not just for a phone, for the entire economy. So, I mean, some days there's more kind of musing at home, particularly living in the United States, where young people pay arms and legs for their education. I think there's even the case for a class action suit to say, hey, you universities, you gave us such a huge student debt and we are not prepared for the future that is about to arrive. I mean, if I think of business schools, that the level of sustainability that's being taught there is just frightening. I mean, just seen as a little CSR thing, rather than recognizing businesses that are not fit for the future. They're going to hurt themselves if you have an offering that is not going to be needed for humanity to succeed. Your markets will shrivel away, and it's still being taught as kind of something on the sideline. So I have a lot of compassion for young people, that they get kind of taught by arrogance and like from this system saying, we know how the world works. And in reality, our generation, my generation, we don't know exactly how to move forward. We should be humble enough to say we can be your mentors possibly. You have a big task. You are absolutely.
Oh dear, we've lost Mattis there, but we will move on to the next. Oh, sorry, Mattis, we had a bit of a blackout there, but I think we got the gist, and it is absolutely fascinating. What a damning indictment of education that was, and what a wake-up call as well. Let me turn finally to a question about political will, and maybe, Helen, this is more in your zone. Will there be enough political will to be bold with policy to basically do something and make COP have a lasting legacy from this latest COP 26?
You're not asking easy questions here. I think that when we talk about political will, again, I would take it back to we have to kind of get below the global level. That we build global urgency and we talk about these as global challenges, but that's not where kind of action is happening and where real policy changes can be made. And so I think looking to the commitments that have been made over the past few days, the launch of the First Movers Coalition, kind of looking at these more activity-based or more kind of specific commitments that have been, brewing and being set up to be launched at COP26 for months. That this is the culmination and announcement of what some of that political will kind of is, and we're going to see a lot over the next kind of week and a half of whether there's enough.
Okay, thank you, Helen. To Mattis, the same question. The political will, is it there?
Yeah, I think we hold the story wrong. We believe that we have a global problem that we can only solve through global collaboration, and we wait for this collaboration to emerge out of kind of a wonderful word, but actually the story is quite the opposite. If COP will disappoint us, the need for us individually as cities, as companies and as countries to act gets even stronger, because the context in which we will live will be even more unsafe or more challenging. So it's exactly the other way around. We are not trapped in a tragedy of the commons. It's actually the other way around. We know what the future will be like, and if we don't prepare ourselves, we hurt directly ourselves. So action is not just a nice deed for the rest of the world. It's a necessary ingredient for each of us to be successful. I think that's how we need to tell the story, rather than to wait for all the others to say, we can only act once everybody agrees. That's the most absurd, I think, way of holding the problem.
Doing at the moment.
And
Sorry, Helen.
And to act and then, well, I was just going to say, and to act and learn from each other, that the global cooperation, public and private, is still needed. We need the kind of global community to come together, but it doesn't take all of that cooperation for anyone to take action. Everything that's happening around the world, we can learn and share.
Helen, I've got to ask, are there positive signs that people are beginning to cotton on to this, that we need to put petty differences aside and look at the bigger picture, and there will be better global cooperation? Do you think we're headed in that direction?
I mean, I think I see the best of it within the forum. As a platform for global public and private collaboration, I think that we get to see where that's happening and how that's happening. And I would point, I mentioned kind of when I spoke a few minutes ago of the First Movers Coalition. And I would call attention to that in terms of how fast it has moved to come together and be kind of real climate action, with a lot of big players coming to the table and saying this needs to happen.
Thank you so much. Juan Carlos, political will.
I think there is political will, but perhaps not enough. I totally agree with the other panelists that we have to do our homework. I don't like politics, especially in my country, but I go to vote every time just to have the right to complain about what politicians do. So as an industry, as a company, we have to do our homework, and then if the governments don't do what they should do, at least we can complain. You can see the bottle half full, half empty. When you look at Paris 2015, it failed because a lot of commitments that the countries took in that time, they have not achieved them. This is true. But on the other side, it was the first time that 120 countries agreed on something. 2 days ago, India committed to be net zero in 2070. Well, this is 20 years later than 2050, and I will be even more retired by then, by that time. But at least we have a commitment. So I totally agree. We have to do what we have to do, and countries will do it because there is no other chance. So we will do it.
And finally, Joe.
I'm not sure how much more there is to add apart from it comes back down to what you've all said. It is also about us making individual choices. So we're in that shopping aisle and we're looking at the 5 products. Which one do we want to choose?
Does somebody want to ask a question there? Yes. Oh, their hand's going up. Let's do that just for a couple of minutes. I'm excited now. Can we get a microphone? There's a guy in front, and then we'll come to the guy behind you. I know you, sir. We've had you on before, but anyway. Sorry, very quickly.
Yeah, hi, Daniel Toole. I'm going to ask 2 quick questions, different questions. So, Juan Carlos, I don't know if you could say something about the price differential between your recycled steel and normal steel, and what your views are on price elasticity in the market versus whether non-recycled or more polluting steel should be taxed to equalise the price. And then I'm going to be a little bit more emotive on the D&I front. Maybe you could comment, Joanna, on what it is we need to do and why it's so hard, and I think it's really easy to put diverse faces in the boardroom, because quite frankly in Europe right now it is atrocious. And what we need to do to reach down to the kids that don't even make it into the companies before the recruitment stage, because we've got 2 ends of the bell which are not working. I mean, I went to Cambridge University, top of the class in London Business School. All the black people I know did not get jobs, are not on boards. They don't care anymore. They're running private companies, and we're not waiting.
Oof, right. Juan Carlos. First of all, Juan Carlos, if you'd like to address the steel.
Yes, my question is the easiest one too.
I think it is an easier one, yeah.
In our sector, what is happening today is that some companies, mainly related to the automotive industry, are beginning to ask for, let's call it green steel. So what we can do, producers, is, in our case, Scope 2 is practically 50% of our emissions, and we can buy a percentage of the energy that we use from green energy, from hydropower. This is the case, for instance, of the company that we have in Norway, that because of the energy supply there, the hydropower is a high percentage of the total energy consumed, and our Scope 2 is very low. So you can sell certificates saying, okay, 15% of the steel that I have produced was with green energy, and I can certificate to you that we have sold you this 15%, and then when you supply to Volkswagen, you can say that your scope 3 is lower because of this. This has just begun, but I totally think that it is unstoppable. It will continue, and this is good news.
Okay, and now to the really easy question.
And I don't think there's one right answer, and I think it comes back down to, again, individuals. If you're in the position to be able to recruit, if you're in the position of management of any area within your business, or even the ability to influence. And so you don't need to be in management to challenge your HR partners or to challenge your manager on what is happening. It comes down to when people look towards a company and they want to look there, and as you're saying, if it's not a diverse board or if it's not a diverse management team, can they see themselves there? They don't see their own reflection. And so this comes back once again to what do you do? So for me, my summer, I had summer interns. Page Group, we sponsored here in the UK, the 10,000 Black Intern Programme. And we had several members in and amongst even the finance community. So they didn't come into the recruitment side of the business, there were others that went into that side. But within the finance community, we had several. We were giving them opportunities for them to taste test what it was actually like to be in a FTSE 250 organisation, and to work through what did they want from their career. And that's just one example. There are multiple examples where you challenge yourself. So when you're putting yourself out and putting your recruitment out and you go, right, well, what's my preferred ideal candidate? Are you using the same cookie cutter that you were cast from? Or are you deliberately targeting skills that you may not have as an individual? So you're polar opposite, someone who will be able to give you that diversity thought, ultimately that will strengthen your team and your organisation.
I think we've probably got to wrap it up. If it's very quick, mister, no, he's saying no, I think he'd probably like more detail. Oh, there's another... I'm so sorry, we've run out of time. I am really, really sorry. I want to give you all a break as well. But can I say a wonderful big thank you, Mattis, Helen. I'm so sorry you weren't here. It would be lovely to welcome you to Glasgow another time. And wonderful to have Juan Carlos and to have Joanna here. Can we give them a round of applause, please? They've been amazing. As I said, it's time for a short break. Get back here for 11:45. We're breaking out for some sessions to address lots of things I love thinking about, food and drink, plus low-carbon renewables, another key area. So enjoy your break, stretch your legs. Thanks for now. Cheers. Whew, thank you. Thank you so much.